No one ever mistook Mia Lehman for one of the guests. The sun was shining brightly, and the wind carried the salty scent of the ocean over the crowd. In that moment, the only question on everyone's mind was, who is this woman, and how did she get here? Because Mia was not like the other women. Their dresses came from dazzling collections of well-known brands as famous as their names. Their sunglasses were expensive, and their jewelry could have been pieces in a museum. Mia, however, was wearing just a simple white linen dress. She had on plain leather sandals, and her hair was loosely braided. She wasn't holding a phone. She had no jewelry. She didn't even have a bit of makeup on her face. But the most noticeable thing was the worn-out C-knot necklace around her neck. Mocking laughter rose from the crowd. Someone extended a champagne glass toward her with a grin. Are the waiters dressed like this now? What happened to smiling? One of the women said, twisting her lips. Mia kept walking without saying a word. With every step, she disappeared into the clouds of perfume from the women passing by, but their stares pierced her back like needles. Most of the guests were VIPs, bankers, royal connections, industrial tycoons, heirs of world-famous brands. Each of them knew exactly who was who, which handbag was from which season, and who had ties to whom. And Mia didn't belong to their system. That's why she was dangerous. The massive yacht in the center of the ceremony area gleamed, reflecting the sunlight off its steel body. The guests, lined up on the deck with crystal glasses in hand, were sizing each other up. No cameras. The press was not allowed. This was a place where only the chosen ones could enter, where invitations were adorned with precious stones, and every detail was a status symbol. And Mia didn't fit into any of those rules. A male voice rose from the crowd, probably one of the dock workers' guests. Or she got on the wrong boat. Laughter erupted. Mia kept walking, head down. To her, those words were just a hum brought by the wind, because she knew this world's inside as well as the outside. But no one else realized that yet. One of the leading figures in the crowd, Daniel Roth, watched Mia's arrival in shock, dressed in his gray suit. He leaned toward the young woman beside him and whispered, "That dress, like a fisherman's net." The woman giggled, her eyes drifting down to Mia's sandals. "I think she came to pick up something she forgot on the beach," she said dismissively. Photos began to be taken, but Mia didn't flinch, didn't take a step back. She just kept walking, as if those mocking glances passed over her without touching her. Among the few guests watching the live broadcast in the background, there was an older woman. She was watching Mia closely through her glasses, clutching a seashell necklace tightly in her hand. Tears began to fall in a corner no one noticed, because she knew who Mia really was. The woman everyone called nobody was, in fact, the true owner of this massive yacht and so much more. But Mia knew that today was just the beginning. For her, the real test wasn't just proving she belonged there, but quietly taking over. And she would do it without anyone noticing. When Mia stood at the center of the deck, it felt as though the wind had suddenly changed direction. Whispers spread like waves, growing louder with each step she took. She had locked her gaze on one spot, the large crystal ice sculpture on the yacht, moving toward it, to a position so central that everyone could see, but no one could reach. She wasn't smiling. There was no anger in her eyes, nor fear. She only carried the silence of patience and a decision already made. A group of young people walking by couldn't hold back their laughter and turned their cell phones toward Mia. Some were whispering, others speaking openly. Do the new waiters not need an invitation? With that outfit, she'd be more believable cleaning the beach bathrooms. Mia kept walking. There wasn't a single person she made eye contact with, but everyone was talking about her. Vivian Kruger, sitting in the front row in her $70,000 lace dress, turned to her friend. "Look at that girl," she said mockingly. Did someone forget their backup and she showed up instead? Her companions laughed. Vivian held out her empty glass toward Mia. "Would you hold this? Thought you might be able to help. At least you'd be good for something," she said loudly, so everyone could hear. Laughter erupted. Mia took the glass. Silently, she poured champagne from the tray of a nearby waiter and turned the glass toward herself. Then she took a sip. She didn't react, nor did she look at the people around her. For those who understood the meaning of the gesture, a brief silence settled, but the mockery had already spread. Phones went up again, trying to capture the moment of her drinking from the glass. The images were soon being shared in private groups with the hashtag #FakeGuest. Meanwhile, Mia's mother sat in a chair at home, her hands tightly clasped, watching the live broadcast. The expression of patience on her daughter's face was familiar to her. It was the same look Mia had when she was a child, fixing a tent soaked by a sea storm. Back then, no one believed her, but Mia quietly worked and eventually made everyone embarrassed. Today would be no different, but it hurt. For a mother, the greatest pain was seeing her child being publicly humiliated and degraded. On the deck, the gossip among the guests had turned sharp. Who is this woman? She has no brand, no bracelet, no jewelry. No way she's connected to anyone important. Just her presence on the yacht is a scandal. Mia's skin glowed under the sun, her eyes fixed on the horizon. In that moment, someone noticed. Mia had never hidden her face, but they had never truly looked at her. A waiter approached with a feigned politeness. "This area is for VIP guests," he said, his tone polite but condescending. "If you'd like, we can take you to the staff section." Mia slightly bowed her head, as if to thank him, but she didn't move. The waiter stepped back, confused. Vivian spoke again. "She's probably just a regular person. Maybe someone took pity on her and brought her along. Elijah doesn't like weaknesses like this, but..." She suddenly stopped, because at that moment, the elderly man who owned the yacht stepped onto the podium at the front. The crowd fell silent. The music faded. The man began to speak without a microphone. His voice was clear, deep, and different from the usual. "I thank everyone present here today. This celebration is not just about a yacht's launch. It is a symbol of legacy, courage, and the rightful place of the deserving individual," he said. As the crowd exchanged looks, the man continued. "Now, please listen carefully. Because the honor of officially launching this ship, to me, belongs to the true owner of this island. The captaincy and management, from this day forward, belong to Dr. Mia Lehman." Silence on the deck was like a calm sea before the storm. Then the shockwave spread. Vivian's tiara shifted slightly. The smile vanished from a CEO's face. The waiter didn't drop his tray, but his hand trembled. And Mia, step by step, began walking toward the podium. As Mia walked toward the podium, time seemed to slow down. The hum of the crowd died down. A few champagne glasses were forgotten in hand, faces were frozen, and eyes were wide with shock. Those who had been ruling the deck freely until now were suddenly standing like children caught off guard. These self-proclaimed know-it-alls, with Elijah's words, felt as though they had been slapped in the face by their own social intelligence. Dr. Mia Lehman? A doctor? Could this be possible? A man brought his phone screen closer and whispered, "The United Oceans Commission. Is she an environmental scientist? Is this the Mia who mapped ocean currents?" The woman beside him, horrified, stuttered, "But we called her." "Yes, you mocked her, excluded her, looked down on her. She defeated you without saying a word." When Mia stood at the podium, the plaque behind it caught everyone's attention. The yacht's name was engraved there. Ave Laura. It was written in calligraphy. Beneath it, in smaller letters, "Wisdom surmounts the waves." The crowd still hadn't fully recovered. They didn't even know that the yacht's name referenced a scientific paper published by Mia's mother years ago. But Mia, quietly, was following in her mother's footsteps. "Being here today is not just another ceremony for me," Mia said, her voice clear and steady without needing a microphone. "I didn't grow up here. I wasn't raised around any of you. I learned to survive not on branded shores, but on shores filled with seaweed. When my father kept me away from this world, I wasn't a loss to him. I was a lighthouse. And today, as he hands me this ship, he's showing you something. Who truly belongs." The silence that echoed across the deck was no longer one of respect. It was the silence of shame, regret, and helplessness. As Mia continued speaking, the crowd seemed to shrink. Vivian turned her head. All eyes were on her, because she was the one who had spoken the harshest words against Mia. The glass was still in her hand, but the champagne inside had seemed to dry up. Daniel, standing beside her, tugged at his t-shirt collar and whispered, "Maybe this is a social experiment." But everyone had already figured it out. This wasn't an experiment. This was a victory rising in the middle of a silent revenge. And then, Elijah stepped onto the stage. Behind his daughter, but making sure to remain in her shadow, he walked with calm steps. His old face bore the marks of time, but his eyes were still sharp and focused. He didn't take the microphone. He didn't need to. The crowd was now ready to hear every breath he took. "I sent her to you anonymously," he said. "I wanted to see how she would be received when she first set foot on a yacht. Without your labels, without thinking she's someone from your circle. And you tried to crush her. You looked at her shoes, her dress, without seeing her wisdom, her work, her character. But Mia, she's the woman who made the ocean breathe again. Years ago, she set out on a boat and brought new currents to humanity. And you thought she was just a waitress." The crowd was now looking down at the ground. Their wealth, their social media followers, or their inherited connections were nothing but empty frames in the face of Elijah's words. Then Elijah pulled a document from his pocket. He raised it high. A transfer of ownership. As of today, not just this yacht, but this port, this island, and 100% of the shares of this holding have been transferred to Mia Lehman. Because this legacy can only be carried with honor. And in this world, nothing is more valuable than honor. At that moment, it was as if the sky had changed. The wind began to blow in a different tone. The whispers of the crowd vanished. Only astonished faces, shallow breaths, and trembling hands were left behind. Mia, however, simply bowed her head. She didn't celebrate her victory, nor did she shoot a smug glance. She simply touched her mother's seashell necklace. And in that moment, everyone understood. True nobility wasn't in flashy clothes, but in the stance hidden within silence. The document in Elijah's hand was much more than just a piece of ink. It was a prophecy, a breaking point. It was the announcement of how a generation's system of showmanship and self-interest was crumbling in the face of one person's dignity and principles. And everyone saw it with their own eyes. Those big egos, those connected, name-dropping people in the crowd, they all shared the same silence. The silence of defeat, shame, and perhaps for the first time, a deserved loss. Vivian Kruger opened her phone with trembling fingers. The private group on social media was blowing up with messages. Who is Mia? Elijah's daughter. Is this a joke? The simpler her dress, the harder her impact. Hashtags were flying. Hashtag Mia Rules. Hashtag real owner. Hashtag yacht shame. Hashtag crownless queen. She was no longer just the surprise of the ceremony. She had become a symbol, the living embodiment of a silent revolution. When people learned that Mia wasn't just the owner of the yacht, but of the entire island, they lost control. Just minutes ago, the lips that had laughed at her were now opening in desperation. People scrambling to be in the same frame as Mia, pushing to take photos with her. But Mia simply took a few steps back. She didn't get angry, didn't fight with anyone. The eyes that hadn't seen her in the dark were now watching her stand in the spotlight, but she didn't let them get any closer. A CEO's assistant quickly grabbed his phone. "Set up a meeting with Mia right now," he said urgently. "We need to review all our investment plans." But it was too late. Getting in line for Mia's life, getting an invitation, was not that simple. Because she wasn't someone who distributed power, she was someone who built value. When Mia stepped down from the podium, she turned to her father. Elijah was proud of his daughter, but it was shown not with flashy words, but with a simple nod of his head. One could read in the old man's eyes, "I'm glad this empire is in the hands of someone like you." Then another shockwave hit. Security personnel stepped onto the stage, politely but firmly informing certain people in the crowd that they were being removed from the guest list. The first target was Vivian Kruger. She looked around with wide eyes. "This must be a mistake," she said, her voice high-pitched but insistent. But the staff showed her the document, the ban list signed by Elijah Rowe himself. "The yacht's reputation cannot be tarnished," Elijah had said. "And these names, for the disrespect shown to Mia, no longer have a place in our circle." Not just Vivian, but the other elite names who had supported her were all being escorted to the door. Cameras were recording everything. But this time, it wasn't for mockery, it was for a lesson. Around Mia, a few people were waiting silently. One of them was a man in his 40s, with a serious face. His name was Jonas Muller, Elijah's former advisor. He approached once, saying in a simple tone, "I was wrong about you years ago. But now, there's nothing more natural than this company being yours." Mia simply nodded. "Mistakes heal when faced with courage," she said. As the sunset approached, the ceremony ended. But its impact was just beginning. On social media, Mia's "Walk the Walk of a Woman with her head held high, but without a tiara" went viral. Her dress was hailed in fashion magazines as the symbol of quiet grandeur. Many started researching her past. And do you know what they found? Instead of titles, they found scientific achievements. In the photo frames, instead of yachts, there were coral reefs. Instead of boardrooms, there were hours spent on glaciers. And Mia? She was still the same. A woman moving with the rhythm of the waves, walking without turning her head, giving the heaviest answers without speaking. Now she was the owner of the island and the holding. But instead of the intoxication of power, she carried the weight of responsibility. And the crowd was witnessing a real leader for the first time. After the ceremony, the crowd slowly began to disperse, but the air around Mia still felt charged with electricity. As the sun approached the horizon, the sky turned coral pink, and the light reflecting off the yacht's chrome surface began to shimmer like waves. No one was looking at Mia as though she didn't belong there anymore. They had started to see her silence not as a riddle to be solved, but as a stance to be understood. Mia moved to a small terrace at the back of the yacht. It was a quiet corner, far from the ceremony. She reached her hand out toward the sea. The wind that brushed against her fingertips brought back memories of her long-established bond with the ocean. This yacht, this island, this wealth, none of it was what she had dreamed of. She missed the sleepless nights spent mapping underwater forests, her mother's seashell collection, and the tide she used to watch through a broken telescope when she was a child. But today, even in the heart of this luxurious environment, she still carried traces of those memories. Especially the necklace around her neck, the only legacy left by her mother. That was her true crown. Her father, Elijah, quietly approached this corner. He wore a jacket that still carried the scent of the wind and had an unusual softness in his expression. As he looked at Mia, he neither showed off any pride nor attempted to apologize. So many years had passed between them without much being said that now, words seemed insufficient. Your inheritance is great, but the one inside of you is even greater, Elijah said softly. I built this world, but you can heal it. Without turning to her father, Mia only looked at the horizon. The world I'm trying to build isn't between people, but between currents, she said. But now, those two aren't separate anymore. This ceremony showed me that. Elijah nodded. And to show you this, I needed to bring you here, he said. I wanted to see what became of everyone who carried my name. Then I watched you. You had no labels, but everyone noticed you. In the background, Vivian Kruger and a few others were preparing to leave the island. On their faces, there were traces of the first fallen empire, socially speaking. Neither their tiaras, their last names, nor their labels could save them now. Because today, it wasn't the showiness that won, it was the silence. When Mia went back inside, the yacht's captain greeted her. Our new owner, he said with a smile. But Mia shook her head. Ownership is something else, she said. I'm only taking this as a responsibility. This yacht should be a symbol of respect for the ocean, not a floating palace. Soon after, the echoes of the ceremony, which the media representatives had been unable to attend, leaked to the outside world. Although the event was only broadcast on a private live stream, quotes and leaked images spread around the globe. The moment Mia sipped from her champagne glass became a symbol of silence, turning into rebellion. People were talking about her linen dress, and social media influencers were starting trends to dress simply like her. But Mia didn't participate in any of it. She simply watched, because she knew that true transformation wasn't about being seen, it was about leaving a mark without being noticed. The next morning, Mia woke early and went to the front of the yacht. As the sound of the waves pierced through the morning silence, she reached into her pocket and pulled out an old note written by her mother in her handwriting. It had only one sentence. Not everything that dazzles is valuable. Sometimes the deepest are the quietest. Mia closed her eyes. Everything had fallen into place now. The silence she owned was no longer an inheritance, it had transformed into a movement. The new day dawned on the island with an unusual calm. The morning sun spread over the sea like silk, painting the stones on the dock a golden hue. But that morning, it wasn't just nature that had changed, the way people looked at things had changed too. Mia Lehman was no longer just Elijah Rowe's daughter. She had become a symbol, a threshold, a standard in everyone's mind. People were telling her story, saying, she silenced an empire with just a linen dress. But for Mia, all of this was still noise. True success lay in that silence where values, not names, were spoken. That morning, the yacht's captain brought her a stack of documents, new contracts, management papers, shareholder approvals. Each one showed that Mia was now not just symbolically, but legally at the helm of everything. Mia examined each document carefully. Then she took a pen and refused to sign some of them before tearing them up. "Most of these are remnants of the past," she said quietly. "My future won't only be about where this yacht sails, but who it carries along the way." Elijah nodded proudly at her decision. "Your leadership is different from mine," he said. "I built, but you're the one cleaning up." At that moment, a few small boats docked at the pier. They were the ones who hadn't been allowed on the island yesterday, those not on the guest list, or those who, after learning who Mia really was, wanted to meet her. Among them were students, young scientists, civil society representatives, even some former employees. And all of them were waiting for just one word from Mia. But Mia didn't go to greet them. Instead, she called the oldest staff member at the dock. She only said this to him: "The doors will open now, not by status, but by intent." The echoes on social media were still going strong. The hashtag Mia Movement hashtag had become a global trend. Television channels were turning her story into films. The fashion world had coined Mia's linen dress as the new definition of nobility, while the economic world referred to her rejection of investors as an economic revolution based on values. But Mia was not part of any of this noise. That evening, at sunset, she walked to the edge of the pier with only a few people. With her mother's seashell necklace in her hand and the traces of the past in her eyes, she stopped. There, she placed a flower into the sea, without speaking her name aloud. For her mother, for herself, for all the silenced women and belittled people. When Elijah came to her side, the wind shifted again. "You know," Mia said, "everyone who underestimated me actually did me the greatest favor, because they were only able to truly see me that way." Elijah smiled. The journey that began with silence has now become a roaring memory. Then Mia slowly left the island. There were no applause behind her, no ceremony, just the soft creak of the sails and the steady hum of the engine. The place she was going wasn't clear, but everywhere Mia went, it would no longer be her name that followed, it would be her style. The change a woman created with only her silence echoed in the minds of millions. That day, the waves carried another woman. But this time, she didn't just leave, she left a world behind. If this story moved you too, if you've been reminded that silence speaks louder than show, join this journey. Don't forget to like the story and subscribe to our channel, because sometimes the greatest revolutions begin with just a linen dress and a steady gaze.